Thank you. I'm so grateful that you're so glad to be here with you, because we are in the fight of our lifetimes. This is it. Our freedom, our values, our American way of life are under attack, and we have to take our country back next year before it is gone forever. There's no question about it. This is not an ordinary time. This Obama health law lowers your standard of care. It puts government in charge of your care. And it takes away something as precious as life itself, your liberty. This law will also bankrupt our nation, and repeal of this law should have been the quid pro quo for raising the debt ceiling. The only quid pro quo for raising that debt ceiling. Instead, we got a penny of spending cuts for every dollar of debt hike. Not a dollar for a dollar, a penny. Now, I'm crisscrossing the country alongside the presidential candidates, speaking at the town hall meetings with them in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, to help them keep repeal of this law on the top of the agenda, and to voice the nation's outrage over this law. This health law shreds your constitutional rights. It forces you to enroll in a one-size-fits-all government-designed health plan, whether you want it or not, whether you can afford it or not. And it expands the powers of the IRS to track you down and penalize you if you fail to comply. This law gives the IRS 57 new responsibilities. There is nothing in the United States Constitution that empowers Congress to do this. In fact, those 28 beautiful words of the 10th Amendment expressly prohibit it. Even worse, for the first time in history, the federal government is given the power to dictate how doctors treat privately insured patients. So even if you're an Aetna or Cigna or United Healthcare, the government is going to be in charge of your care. Section 1311 of this law says that insurance companies can pay only those doctors and hospitals that obey the dictates of the federal government in the name of, quote, quality. Well, that covers everything in medicine. When your cardiologist decides to recommend a stent versus a bypass, when your OBGYN does a cesarean section. Your treatments have to be entered into the electronic database that the federal government will have access to. Your doctor's decisions will be monitored by the federal government. And ultimately, your doctor will have to decide between doing what's right for you and avoiding a government penalty. This is unconstitutional. In fact, in 2006, in Gonzalez versus Oregon, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the federal government could not dictate how doctors treat patients. The pro-choice women's groups have gone to the barricades for decades to prevent the government from accessing their health records or dictating to their doctors. Now, these same groups are supporting a health law that empowers the federal government to do both those things. How can it be that a woman has the freedom to choose an abortion, but not a hip replacement? Either your body is free from government interference, or it isn't. Now, the president, you've heard him say many times that he's going to solve the problem of the uninsured by making health plans more affordable. But he hasn't done that. You've gotten your premium hikes in the mail. Instead, what this law does is to vastly expand the currently uninsured on Medicaid, vastly expanding that program, lowering the bar for eligibility, and expanding the benefits. Nearly a third of non-elderly Americans will be on Medicaid. And how is this vast expansion paid for? Well, there are $503 billion in new taxes right here in this law. And now they're floating the idea of a VAT, a Vanishing America tax. Don't let them call it anything else. That's what it is. And even worse, this law expands Medicaid by eviscerating Medicare. It takes $575 billion out of Medicare funding over the next decade and moves it over to expand Medicaid. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul, only it's robbing grandma at gunpoint to spread the wealth. That's exactly what it does. That is the agenda. And it's going to mean fewer hip replacements, fewer knee replacements, fewer angioplasties, bypass surgeries, cataract operations. Those are the 5 procedures that have virtually transformed the experience of aging in this country. I remember when older people who had arthritis were so crippled they were stuck in wheelchairs, unable to walk. Now, older people enjoy their later years, being active because of these procedures. This health law will undo that progress. Richard Foster, the chief actuary at Medicare, has testified before Congress that some hospitals will stop taking Medicare. Where will seniors go when their hospital stops taking Medicare? Their fate will be in the hands of this IPAB board, Independent Payment Advisory Board, 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who will decide what kind of care the government's going to pay for. They're going to lower the reimbursement rates for doctors and hospitals so much that they can't afford to treat seniors anymore. To stop this attack on our liberties and our health care, we have moved the battle to 2 new fronts: the state capitals and the federal courts. 28 states are now challenging the constitutionality of Obamacare. 28! There's more coming on all the time. And we are headed to a constitutional showdown in the U.S. Supreme Court with a decision in June of 2012, before this presidential election. That in itself is an enormous victory, and we worked hard for that. They said it couldn't be done. And I'm confident that with the U.S. Constitution on our side, freedom will prevail. But we also have to elect a president who is fully committed to repealing this health law. Amen. Fully committed. Meanwhile, the current president has handed out 1,472 waivers to certain companies and certain unions, exempting them from the law the rest of us are compelled to obey. The power to grant a waiver is the power to withhold a waiver and destroy a business. In America, no one should have to slither to the White House for a waiver. In our country, the rule of law is king, not Mr. Obama. There is a better way to help the uninsured. Congress should have taken this 2,700-page bill and put it in the paper shredder and given us a 20-page bill in plain, honest English, something that members of Congress would actually read before they vote on it. And if you want to come to my website, defendyourhealthcare.com, you will see such a 20-page bill. 20 pages. So that members of Congress will read it. 20 pages so that you can't slip in those Cornhusker kickbacks and other bribes to get some members of the Senate to vote for it. 20 pages ought to be enough. The great framers of the U.S. Constitution established the entire federal government in just 18 pages. The stakes are very high here. Our liberty and our health care. If you're seriously ill, the best place to be is in the United States. A woman diagnosed with breast cancer in the United States has over a 90% chance of surviving it. In Europe, her chances are less than 80%. That means, do the arithmetic, she's twice as likely to die from it. A man diagnosed with prostate cancer in the US has a 99% chance of surviving it. It is not a death sentence here, but nearly 1 out of every 4 men diagnosed with prostate cancer in Europe dies from it. And if you have someone in your family who has what we currently call an incurable illness, this is the nation of hope. This is where the cures are developed. Since 1950, the United States has won more Nobel Prizes in medicine and physiology than the entire rest of the world combined. That's why this is the fight of our lifetimes for defeating this health law. And we have another fight we have to win too next year. The fight against ever-growing government. Government's grown way beyond the consent of the governed. And the more government spends, the less we have to spend on our families, the fewer choices we have to make for ourselves, the less freedom we have. They used to call politicians public servants, but now they're grinding us into the ground, making us the servants, toiling for them. Under the Obama administration, federal spending has reached 25% of GDP. 25%. Add in state and local government, it's now 42% of GDP. Think about that. 42% of everything all of us produce going to work every day. 42% of the fruits of our labor is sucked up by government programs. You get 42% of your happiness from government? No. Only one other time in American history did government spending reach 42% of GDP. And that was when we launched into World War II. We were fighting for our survival as a nation. Nothing today justifies government taking 42% of the fruits of our labor. It must stop. That is the meaning of this debt ceiling controversy. We got bamboozled. The nation got bamboozled when they allowed the president to raise that debt ceiling. And the super committee, there was only one way for that super committee to reduce spending by $1.3 trillion. Repeal this law. The president piously talks about the need for entitlement reform. The best way to reform entitlements is not to create new ones. He's got $1.3 billion in new entitlements in there. Stop them before they go into effect. He says that we're the inflexible ones. We don't want to raise taxes. You're darn right we're not going to raise taxes. Right. We are already oppressed. The president says that he has cut his federal budget to the bone. That is a lie. He is a liar. He is. He is a liar. I never thought I'd say that about a president of the United States, but he is a liar. And he has not cut his federal budget to the bone. He increases foreign aid 50% over the next 5 years. Foreign aid. He's giving aid to China. Think about it. Yeah. We're borrowing from China and handing them our money at the same time, giving it away. 174 out of the 192 nations in the world receive